Evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. Significant decisions tonight at the Green Bay Area School District Board meeting. After 6 rounds of interviews, the board filled a seat that's been open since February.
And they voted to consider a third option for school boundaries under the master plan. In this first alert update, Emily Riley was at that meeting tonight. She joins us now in the studio with the details. Emily.
Cami and Bill, Rick Crosson has officially joined 6 other board members. The Green Bay School Board has been down 1 member ever since Laura Layton and Warren resigned earlier this year. Her resignation came shortly after the investigation and resignation of Superintendent Claude Tiller Jr. Monday night, 6 candidates were given 30 minutes to answer questions from the board. Crosson spoke about how he plans to help improve the district and work collaboratively with fellow board members on critical issues. According to his professional page, Crosson is a retired business executive for several organizations.
I tend to think with the end in mind, and then we backward plan to where we currently are, and that backward planning process becomes our roadmap to get us there. And then there's checkpoints along the way to make sure that we are on track.
The board says it was important to make the right choice, especially considering the new board member would be a part of their search for a new superintendent.
So things like budgeting and just large-scale change, which we're in the middle of right now, that will be very important in the coming year, and I think he can bring that.
Among other key issues at the meeting, the board unanimously voted to direct district leadership to create a third scenario for the Boundary Advisory Adjustment Committee to consider. It comes after a community survey and other feedback showed lagging support for the first 2 boundary plans. Green Bay schools are trying to rectify declining enrollment and a tight budget. 2 other board members who secured their seats in the spring election, Andrew Becker and newcomer Ku Lee, will be sworn in later this month. The committee will meet again to further develop the third scenario. Bill and Cami.